Imagine the winter of 1778, and the Continental Army is dying in the frozen fields of Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Soldiers huddle in ragged tents without blankets, while their breath turns to ice and their stomachs growl with desperate hunger. George Washington watches his army dissolve before his eyes, because the money to save them simply doesn't exist anymore. This isn't just a military crisis. It's a financial catastrophe that threatens to end the American Revolution before it truly begins. But what if I told you that one man's checkbook would prove more powerful than 1,000 muskets? To understand how desperate things were, you need to grasp the impossible economics facing the Continental Congress in these early years. The 13 colonies had declared independence, but they had no centralized treasury and no real authority to collect taxes from states. Congress could only beg individual states for money, and most of them simply refused or delayed, protecting their own interests first. Meanwhile, they'd printed continental currency to pay soldiers, but the bills were becoming worthless paper as inflation spiraled out of control. The phrase, "not worth a continental," became a bitter joke among troops who couldn't buy bread with their military wages. Washington sent letter after desperate letter to Congress, explaining that his men were literally starving and deserting by the hundreds. And Congress had nothing to offer except sympathy, because their coffers were completely empty and their credit was shot internationally. Into this crisis stepped Robert Morris, a wealthy Philadelphia merchant who understood that revolutions aren't won with courage alone, they need capital. Morris had built a shipping empire before the war, trading goods across the Atlantic and amassing one of the largest fortunes in America. He understood international finance, credit networks, and how to move money and materials when governments couldn't, which made him uniquely dangerous. More importantly, Morris believed deeply in independence and was willing to risk everything he'd built to see the colonies break free from Britain. When Congress appointed him superintendent of finance in 1781, they were essentially handing him an impossible job with no resources. But Morris didn't need Congress's money, because he had something far more valuable in a credit crisis: his own impeccable personal reputation. He immediately began writing what became known as Morris Notes, personal promissory notes backed by his own fortune rather than worthless government currency. And here's the brilliant part: merchants and suppliers actually trusted Morris Notes, because everyone knew Robert Morris paid his debts no matter what. Morris started using these notes to purchase flour, beef, gunpowder, and clothing, supplies the army desperately needed but Congress couldn't afford to buy. He was essentially co-signing the American Revolution with his personal wealth, betting his entire fortune that Washington's army could somehow win. But Morris knew that promissory notes alone wouldn't be enough, so he turned to his extensive network of international merchants and financiers. Through his shipping connections, Morris arranged for American tobacco and grain to be exported to Europe in exchange for weapons and ammunition. He negotiated loans from French and Dutch bankers who wouldn't lend to Congress, but would lend to Robert Morris personally, trusting his business acumen. At the same time, Morris worked tirelessly with Haym Salomon, a brilliant financial broker who helped him access additional credit from Jewish merchants internationally. Together, they begged, borrowed, and leveraged every relationship they had, turning personal trust into military supplies when government authority had completely failed. Morris also recognized that the currency crisis needed a structural solution, not just his personal intervention. So he proposed something radical for America. In 1781, he established the Bank of North America in Philadelphia, the first bank chartered by Congress in American history. This wasn't just another commercial bank. It was specifically designed to lend money to the government and stabilize the chaotic wartime currency system. Morris convinced wealthy investors to put real gold and silver into the bank, creating a reserve that could back legitimate loans to Congress. For the first time since independence, the Continental Congress had access to actual credit that merchants and soldiers would accept as real money. The bank issued notes backed by specie reserves, which immediately traded at better value than continental currency and restored some financial credibility. But Morris's most important contribution wasn't institutional. It was personal, immediate, and directly saved lives during the darkest winter of the war. Throughout 1777 and 1778, Washington corresponded directly with Morris, describing the horrific conditions at Valley Forge in desperate detail. Washington explained that soldiers were marching barefoot in the snow, leaving bloody footprints, and that thousands were sick from malnutrition and exposure. Morris responded not with sympathy letters, but with action, immediately leveraging his Philadelphia network to secure wagon loads of supplies for the encampment. He purchased flour and salted meat on his personal credit when Congress had no money, then arranged transport to Valley Forge through trusted merchants. Morris also procured blankets, shoes, and winter clothing, understanding that an army freezing to death couldn't fight Britain no matter how brave they were. Perhaps most crucially, Morris ensured that soldiers received actual pay and notes they could use, which prevented mass desertion during those brutal months. When Continental currency became completely worthless, Morris notes kept soldiers fed and motivated because merchants would accept them as legitimate payment everywhere. The relief Morris provided didn't just deliver supplies. It restored morale by showing the troops that someone with real power was fighting for them. Washington himself acknowledged that without Morris's financial interventions, the army would have collapsed at Valley Forge and the revolution would have died there. And this pattern continued throughout the war, with Morris repeatedly opening his personal credit line whenever Congress failed to deliver funds for operations. By 1781, when Washington planned the decisive Yorktown campaign against Cornwallis, the Continental Army again faced a critical funding crisis. Congress couldn't pay for the march south or supply the siege, which meant the entire operation, and possibly the war, would collapse before it started. Morris personally guaranteed payment for the supplies and transportation, essentially underwriting the Yorktown campaign with his own fortune and the bank's resources. He secured loans, organized supply chains, and ensured soldiers had food and ammunition during the march, logistics that made military victory possible. When Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown and effectively ended the Revolutionary War, it was as much a financial victory as a military one. Robert Morris had proven that economic power could change the course of history just as decisively as battlefield tactics or political declarations. After the war, Morris continued serving as superintendent until 1784, working to stabilize the new nation's chaotic finances and establish credit. He negotiated debt settlements with international creditors, managed repayment schedules, and helped transform America from a financial basket case into a credible borrower. The Bank of North America continued operating and served as the model for Alexander Hamilton's later First Bank of the United States. Morris earned the title Financier of the Revolution, not through military glory but through the quiet, relentless work of keeping an army alive. His willingness to risk personal bankruptcy for a cause he believed in transformed him from successful merchant into indispensable national hero. Yet history often forgets Morris, because financial heroism doesn't fit our romantic narratives of revolution. We prefer muskets over balance sheets. But Valley Forge teaches us that wars are won not just by courage, but by the unglamorous work of securing food, clothing, and pay. Robert Morris understood that a starving army can't fight for freedom, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is signing your name to debt. His legacy reminds us that economic leadership and personal sacrifice can be just as decisive as any battle in determining the fate of nations. So the next time you hear about Valley Forge, remember the banker who turned his fortune into freedom and saved the revolution.